Hello everybody and welcome to another sunny day here in Barcelona and another sunny review here with the two beasts, KTM's new 990 Duke versus KTM's mega flagship power naked 1390 Super Duke R EVO. Does this comparison make any sense? Let's find out. Now let me begin right off saying that there is a big price difference between these two bikes. Now the question I will throw into the air right now is, does it make any sense buying the new Super Duke 1390 or should you rather go for the 990? What are the differences between the two bikes? We're about to find out, so let's jump right into it. Now, let's talk about the ergonomics and their daily use. Now, if you want to daily your motorcycle, what is the better one, the 990 or the 1390? Let's start off with the riding position. Now, for a rider of my height, the riding position of the 990 Duke is way better. Why? Because the tank is simply not as wide, everything is not as big and bulky, so I actually touch the ground with both of my feet on the Duke, on the 990 Duke, whereas on the 1390 Duke, I didn't expect it, but I do have a bit more problems of reaching the ground with both feet. I am definitely giving the point to the 990 Duke when it comes to riding position for not too tall riders. I'm 170 centimeters tall, something thereabout, so yes, keep that in mind. Next point, utility in the city. Both of these bikes offer a great throttle response in the city. You have different riding modes which sweeten the throttle response even more. So if you want to, then you can just put it in rain mode or street mode, and in the city you will not have any jerkiness or anything in that regard. Let's move on to another important aspect, which would be this here, the clutch lever. The clutch lever on the 990 Duke can be pressed without a lot of force. You really don't need a lot of pressure to get this lever going, whereas on the 1390 Duke you need a lot of strength. In comparison, a lot of strength. It's not like you need to be Godzilla, but you need more strength than on the 990 Duke, which if you come to a stop every 15 seconds and need to press that clutch in, it's gonna make a difference in the city. It's gonna make a difference in the long run. It really will. I definitely cannot use just one finger for the clutch of the 1390, whereas on the 990 one finger is more than enough. So another point, it being a small point doesn't matter, another small point for the 990. The vibrations of both of these bikes are about the same. I actually believe that the 1390 vibrates less than the 990, but anyways, both of these bikes don't vibrate excessively, so that is good as well. The ergonomics of both of these bikes are pretty good. You can sit upright, however you're closer to the handlebar on the 990 Duke, probably due to all of the plastics and the tank and the things you have on the 1390 Duke. The 990 is a bit slimmer and less bulky. Talking about the aesthetics is, yes, a bit difficult when it comes to these two bikes. They really look the same though. Like from the front, you don't really know which is which. Maybe you could spot the winglets, which are only available on the Super Duke, or from the side, you obviously get to see the two fat headers, the V2 engine, and that makes it clear from an aesthetic point of view. Otherwise, you don't really notice a big difference. Another interesting aspect is the quick shifter. Now, we actually noticed that the quick shifter on the 990 Duke works better. Now, they're both phenomenal quick shifters. Sometimes they don't work as precisely as they maybe tend to, but in reality and overall, both of these quick shifters work very, very well. If I had to pick a winner though, the 990 Duke would get the win. The 990 Duke has a shorter transmission, which is better on this bike. It makes it feel a bit better overall. However, the insane power, obviously, of the 1390 Duke is still always appreciated. So, when it comes to the brakes, there is really no comparison, as the brakes on the 990, I'll just say it the way it is, are shit. Okay, they're not good at all. They are Brembo brakes in reality, and on paper they should be very good. However, they are simply not. Now I also made 2 videos of these bikes, reviewing them one by one. In this video, however, I'll focus on a comparison between the two. So let's get right back to the brakes. The brakes of the Super Duke are fantastic. They're out of this world. They are absolutely top notch. You have Brembo brakes as well, and with the best type of modulability that you can get. You really only need one finger. You press it slightly and it presses and it brakes slightly. It really is so very nice to use, this brake. It really never lets you down. It always gives you a lot of feedback. It lets you know you're never in the dark, and you never have to fear of by mistake pressing it too hard and doing a stoppie. Now, obviously that is an exaggerated statement, but the brakes on the 990 Duke to a certain extent feel like that, whereas the 1390 Duke does not at all. Both of these suspensions are really good. I have to say, usually KTM suspensions are known to be more sporty than comfortable. Both of these bikes offer a great suspension. Obviously, on the EVO version that we have here, we have a semi-active suspension, which is obviously way more expensive than a conventional setup, but sadly we couldn't get the normal Super Duke R for this comparison. But let me tell you one thing, and that would be that this suspension on the 990 Duke does everything really good. They found a great compromise between a suspension that does an excellent job when ridden hard, when the bike's ridden hard, and a suspension that dampens all of the hits and bumps you can feel in the city. So definitely both great suspensions overall. Obviously they're both fully adjustable, so in case you can always set it up for your needs as well. Overheating issues, we didn't really have any. Now I don't know if there even are any of those. Anyways, we rode these bikes here in the spring sun of Barcelona, which means 18 degrees Celsius, and therefore we did not have any issues with that at all. When maneuvering these bikes, there is a clear winner. The 990 Duke, being the less heavy one, is simply more agile. That is because of the weight, because of the dimensions of the engine, because everything that is bound to these aspects. So it is really easy with the 990 Duke, maneuvering it around, maybe pushing it for a bit, whereas the extra 20 kilograms the KTM Super Duke can really be felt. Now let's talk about the handling as well. Like I said, the suspension works great. and the handling of both of these bikes is phenomenal. They both feel at home in the twisties. You really notice that they really want to be ridden one corner at a time. They enter, they throw themselves into the corner. They really want to be thrown into the corners. Both of them do. I personally preferred the 990 Duke. My colleagues did so as well, simply because it is more agile, it is more playful. It is just a more playful bike when compared to this monstrosity that the Beast is. Also, the riding position when in the corners is a bit different. You wouldn't expect it, but the Super Duke tells you more that it wants you to ride it with the hang-off style, whereas the 990 does definitely permit that as well. You can ride it hang-off if you wish to, but it prefers a more neutral riding position overall. So I wouldn't base my choice around my riding style, because like I said, both do offer both possibilities, but just to let you know, the Super Duke a bit more. When it comes to the feedback the front tires give you, then the Super Duke is the clear winner. Due to the riding position on the Super Duke when compared to the 990 Duke, and due to a few other factors, the feedback from the front tire is simply better on the Super Duke. The 990 Duke still offers good feedback, however not as good as the Super Duke does. Now we have two different tires here. We have the Michelin GP on the Super Duke and the Michelin Power 6 on the 990 Duke, and I have to say on the Super Duke needs a bit more time to warm up, and only then, once it's warm, does the bike really feel ready to go. Before, it feels a bit weirder, whereas the Duke 990 with its Power 6 immediately can be ridden very well. You have a lesser warm-up time. Next point is the engine and the throttle response. So both of these bikes have over 120 horsepower. More precisely, the Duke has 123. The Super Duke has 190 horsepower, coming both from two-cylinder engines. This is the Super Duke has a V2 75-degree V2. That's the 990 Duke featuring an inline twin. The 990 Duke's power is enough in the twisties. The 990 Duke's power is simply enough. The torque it produces throughout the entire rev range, so from 2000 RPMs all the way until you hit the limiter, this bike just pushes you everywhere you want to go. And I really have to say that the 120 horsepower almost seemed to be the sweet spot when it comes to horsepower necessary in the twisties. 190 horsepower, never ever am I gonna ever be able to use this bike's peak power, because I'm just not gonna reach it. I have its peak power at 10,000 RPM, peak torque at 8,000 RPM, which in second gear already means that you're way over the speed limit anyways. So overall, yes, the Super Duke has more power, yes, it has more torque, but the 990 Duke's engine produces enough power by far for very spirited riding in the twisties. The 990 Duke features a shorter transmission, and that really is a plus point for the bike, because it simply revs up faster, and the engine producing a lot of torque everywhere throughout the rev range means that you can short shift it, you can also not short shift it and let it hit the limiter. You will always be in the exact right rev range to use this bike's power. The longer transmission on the Super Duke R makes it feel a bit inferior when it comes to the fun factor, that's what I want to say. However, the Super Duke R offers way more stability than the 990 Duke. Like I said, the brakes on this bike are pretty bad. Whereas the brakes and the suspension, well, the suspension on both of these bikes is good. Like I said, the brakes are really bad on the 990. So the Super Duke really takes the win here. You can fly, you can basically sail from one curve to the next and just enjoy the ride. And the lines you can draw on the Super Duke with this suspension and this brake is simply fantastic. That is a great feeling that cannot be matched on the 990 Duke. Now when it comes to the vibrations, both of these bikes are fine. But the Super Duke R produces less vibrations. The vibrations on the handlebar can be felt, yes, on the footpegs as well, yes, but they are simply less. And therefore the Super Duke takes the win in that regard. The 990 Duke, still, it's not like it produces too many vibrations and make it unpleasant or anything in that regard. What was very interesting to notice, however, was the sound difference of these bikes. Now you're probably gonna say, yeah, well, obvious. The Super Duke has the Akrapovic exhaust and the 990 Duke has the standard exhaust, right? No, you're wrong. You're actually wrong. Because the stock exhaust on the 990 Duke is amazing. It is really, really, really well engineered. Good job, KTM there with the 990 Duke's exhaust. It starts to make all types of sounds whenever you change gears. If you shift at over 5,000 RPMs, then it is always gonna give you a good bang. And also when using the quick shifter between the gears, it will always pam. It always fire a good shot. So good job with the 990 Duke's exhaust. The Akrapovic on the Super Duke is really a letdown in my opinion. I expected an Akrapovic exhaust to feel like an Akrapovic exhaust, but on the Super Duke it really didn't feel that special at all. When you're not riding it, it actually feels and sounds way louder than when you're on the bike, which is the exact opposite of what I want. I want my surroundings not to hear, or to hear as little as possible of the exhaust sound, because they're obviously gonna hate me already for riding a bike. With the Akrapovic exhaust, I at least wished that the rider would feel or hear the sound this bike, this huge engine would produce very well. Sadly, I have to say that the stock exhaust of the 990 Duke is way more impressive than the Akrapovic exhaust on the Super Duke. Now let us also talk about the pricing of both of these bikes. And let's also answer the question if the Super Duke is really necessary or not. Now, before I give you all of the numbers and prices of these bikes, at least European prices, because obviously prices vary around the world, just to give you a first impression of what these two bikes will cost, or about what they will cost. Before we do that, let us answer the question. Does the Super Duke make any sense on the road? My personal answer is no. I would never pay so much money just so that the electronics the electronics are fantastic, by the way, just so that the electronics can tame the bike, because I'm never gonna be able to ride it at its core, at its fundamental way. It is too big, it has too much power. Without traction control, I couldn't probably survive a week on this bike. The ABS works fine, the traction control works fine, but every time you accelerate, you can feel the traction control activating itself in a very subtle way, which is very good. You don't really notice, but you do notice that the acceleration is tamed basically by the electronics. I much rather prefer having a bike with less power, where I can turn traction control off maybe, or put it in its lowest setting and confidently say, okay, now I can have some fun in the twisties without risking to throw away a lot of money. And with that, I'm gonna pass over to the next part, which would be final part, the prices of these bikes. So let's talk briefly about the prices of these bikes. Now, prices do vary in all of the regions around the world. I'll give you the European prices, or even in Europe the prices do vary, so about what the European prices are. Now we have the Super Duke R here in its Evo version, which costs 24,300 euros, and the 990 Duke, which costs 15,230 euros. So between these two models we have a difference of almost, I say almost, 10,000 euros, 9,000 some or 8,000 something to be precise. And I have to say, I would actually go for the 990 Duke because it is simply the more agile of the two bikes, featuring enough horsepower and enough torque for all types of uses. Compared to their rivals though, they are still one of the most expensive options on the market. The Super Duke R costing only less than a Street Fighter V4. The rest of its competition, like an MT10, an MT10 SP, a Speed Triple RS, the 1200, or what else is there? Let me check real quick. An M1000R, so a BMW, an Aprilia Tuono, or an Aprilia RS V4. They all cost way less money than the Super Duke R, except for, like I said, the Ducati V4 Street Fighter and the M1000R, which costs slightly less and not a lot less. Anyways, what do you get for the money? You do get a hell of a lot, let me tell you that. And the thing is, you don't really have a lot of competition when it comes to these bikes. If you really desire a gigantic V2 engine like the one in the KTM Super Duke, then you really are left with only the Super Duke. You can go for a V2 Street Fighter as well, but it's not the same as a Super Duke. If you want the utmost torque you can find, then you gotta go for the Super Duke. And the 990 Duke is still the lightest bike in its category. It offers great agility and is so nimble. Therefore, even if the bikes are expensive, yes, if you can manage to get them, they are fun guaranteed. And with that, thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.